There were 5 forks on the drying rack. We only owned 4. That's how it started. Not with lipstick. Not with silence. Not with a weird text message or some hotel receipt in a coat pocket. Just a 5th fork. I stood there for a full minute, staring at it, trying to remember if maybe we bought a new set, and I forgot. But I hadn't. I knew our forks. They were dull, scratched up, from a clearance bin at some home goods store 3 years ago. This one was different. Sleek. Polished. It had a little curve in the handle like it was designed for someone who never sweats. And I swear to you, it was still wet. She was in the shower at the time. I didn't say anything. I just opened the drawer and slid it in with the rest like it belonged there. But I knew it didn't. I knew he had been here. And that's when everything started clicking. The smell of cologne I couldn't place last Tuesday. The water bill going up despite us both working late. The time she said the cat knocked over the lamp. But the cat had been with me at the vet all day. The lamp. The cologne. The fork. This wasn't about a one-night mistake. It was a pattern. A system. A routine. I waited until dinner to say something. She made penne with vodka sauce and roasted zucchini. She knows I hate zucchini. It felt intentional. Like she wanted to pick a fight, but didn't have the energy to start one. We ate mostly in silence. Then she looked at me, right in the middle of chewing, and said it. You were never supposed to find out. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She just said it. As if we were talking about the weather. As if I was the one interrupting her plan by noticing. I didn't respond. Didn't ask a single question. I stood up, left my half-finished plate on the table, grabbed my coat, and walked out the door. That was 2 weeks ago. And what I've found since then, the emails, the hidden photos, the receipts from places I've never been, has made me realize something horrifying. This wasn't just cheating. It was orchestration. And I wasn't the only one she did this to. I didn't sleep for the first 3 nights. Not because I missed her. Not even out of rage. It was something deeper than that. Like my brain refused to power down until it could assemble the full picture. But every time I tried to make sense of it, I felt like I was solving a puzzle with pieces from 10 different boxes. By the 4th night, I checked into a roadside motel with a flickering vacancy sign and cigarette burns on the curtains. I chose it because it was the kind of place no one would ever think to look. I turned off my phone, bought a burner, took a shower with the lights off, and then I logged into our old shared email. I'd forgotten it even existed. We made it during our first year together, back when we were still in that dopey, let's have matching inboxes phase. It had been dormant for years, used mostly for junk mail and coupons from grocery stores we didn't shop at anymore. But someone had used it last week. Specifically, someone had reset the password to a file storage app we'd both forgotten about. One of those random cloud services that gives you 20 gigs free and then harasses you to upgrade for eternity. I reset the password again and logged in. There were 4 folders. Vacations, recipes, Doug's birthday, and one labeled miscellaneous waxing crescent moon. Of course, I opened that last one first. There were 67 files. Most of them were harmless, screenshots of airline tickets, old furniture listings, memes about wine moms. But tucked between those were things that made my skin crawl. Photos of our living room from angles I'd never seen. Photos taken at night. Photos of me, asleep on the couch, brushing my teeth, tying my shoes at the front door. Photos I never knew were being taken. One even showed me standing at the sink, doing dishes, with a man's coat hanging over the dining room chair behind me. A coat I didn't own. There was video, too. Blurry, short clips. One where I'm on a Zoom call, rambling about quarterly claims reports, while shadows move behind the bedroom door. Another one shows me leaving for work, and 10 minutes later, a man walks in through the back entrance with a key. I stared at the screen, while rising in my throat. Not because she cheated. Not even because she filmed me without my knowledge. But because none of it looked rushed. There was no fear in their movements. No shame. Just calm repetition, like they'd done it dozens of times before. Like I was the unwelcome guest in my own house. And then came the last file. A recording. Just audio. Titled simply, Practice Run. It was her voice. Soft. Controlled. Speaking into what sounded like a phone or dictation app he'll notice eventually. Probably not right away. But when he does, I need to stay calm. Deflect. No crying. Just one sentence. That's all it'll take. My blood went cold. That sentence, the one she actually used at dinner, wasn't improvised. She rehearsed it. Which means this wasn't emotional. It wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. She had a script. A plan. A timeline. and I wasn't part of it anymore. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. What could I say? Hey, my wife might be cheating on me, and also maybe filming me through hidden cameras I can't find. They'd hand me a pamphlet for couples therapy and send me on my way. No, I needed something solid. A name. A face. A crack in the illusion I could pry open with my bare hands. So I started with the coat. I remembered it from the photo, long, charcoal gray, double-breasted with a small silver emblem on the lapel. Military style. Not something you pick up at a mall. I screenshotted the image and ran it through a few reverse image searches. Nothing. Then I did something I didn't want to do. I logged into her laptop. We still shared the same backup drive for her old MacBook. The one she stopped using a year ago and swore she'd wipe soon. Of course she didn't. She never cleaned up anything, digital or otherwise. Tucked between old photo projects and PDFs of wine tasting menus was a folder called archive_personal. I opened it, expecting vacation pics or maybe screenshots of dumb arguments. Instead, I found a series of documents. Scanned IDs, a resume, employment records, all belonging to someone named Julian Caro. I'd never heard the name before, but I recognized the face immediately. He was in the background of 2 vacation photos we took in Maine. Once near a pier, just behind us, blurry and out of focus. The second time, standing on a balcony across from our Airbnb, holding a coffee cup, staring at our window. This man wasn't her boyfriend. He wasn't sneaking in while I was gone. He'd been around us for months, maybe longer, watching, quiet, patient. And Carmen, she had documents on him. Why? The resume said he worked in security consultation, whatever that means. It listed a few companies I didn't recognize, a couple government contracts, and then something else, behavioral conditioning, private sector. I had no idea what that meant, but it felt clinical. Cold. I dug deeper. Found an old video Carmen must have recorded in secret. She's sitting across from Julian in what looks like a dim cafe. Her voice is quiet, almost afraid. So, this is really going to work? It's already working, he says. He doesn't ask questions. He's predictable. That's why I chose him. I just don't want to hurt him. You won't. He'll do it to himself. The clip ends. I sat there in the motel room with my laptop humming, my heart pounding in my ears, and a sick realization spreading through my chest like frost. This wasn't an affair. This was an experiment. I had been selected. And that's when I did something reckless. Something impulsive and angry. I drove back to the house. I didn't care if she was there. I didn't care if he was there. I needed answers. When I arrived, the lights were off. No car in the driveway. But the back door, the one from the video, was unlocked. I walked in slowly, phone flashlight guiding the way. Everything looked the same. Uncomfortably the same. Like someone had made an exact replica of our house and forgot to give it a soul. I made my way to the bedroom. That's when I noticed the panel in the closet wall. Just a hair out of alignment. I pulled it open. And behind it, neatly arranged on a corkboard, were dozens of Polaroids of me. Labeled. Dated. Some with notes and handwriting I didn't recognize. Words like compliant, stagnant, ready for escalation. I stood frozen in that narrow space, in the stale air of that hidden compartment, staring at the timeline of my own life as curated by strangers. And then I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I turned. She was standing in the doorway, smiling. She didn't scream when she saw me in the closet, didn't demand to know what I was doing or make up a lie or even act surprised. No, Carmen stood there in the hallway, her silhouette lit by the hallway lamp behind her, wearing that same soft, unsettling smile I had only ever seen once before, at her father's funeral, when no one was looking. I stepped back out of the crawl space, Polaroid still in hand, but she didn't move. She didn't reach for them. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "You shouldn't be here." Yeah. I snapped. Well, you shouldn't be running a science fair project on your own husband. She didn't even flinch. She just stared, like she was waiting for me to tire myself out. I found the photos, I said, holding one up to her face. The cloud drive. The cameras. The guy, Julian. I found everything. But she only nodded, slowly. That's earlier than expected. Earlier than what? She walked past me, calmly, like I wasn't even a threat, sat down on the edge of the bed, and looked up at me with something between pity and calculation. I was supposed to tell you next week. After the shift. What shift? I asked, my voice cracking. She laughed gently, almost kindly. Doug. Do you really think this was about cheating? That I fell in love with someone else? God, I wish it were that simple. I felt dizzy. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might actually drop right there in the doorway. You're going to explain it to me, I said, forcing myself to stay upright. Every detail. Now. She looked away for a second, like she was weighing whether to lie or not. Then she said, "It was a contract. That's all. You were selected. I didn't know who you were when I signed on. They said I'd be paired with someone highly pliable." That's how they phrased it. Julian's team did all the vetting. My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean, paired?" "I wasn't looking for love," she said. "It's not that kind of arrangement. It's a trial program. Social and emotional manipulation under domestic conditions. They're testing patterns of behavior, compliance, adaptation. You were part of the control group Alpha." I took a step back like the words had physically struck me. "I've been married to you for 6 years. Legally, 5 years and 7 months. The first 6 were unmonitored. They needed baseline data." It felt like my lungs collapsed inward. "You knew me," I said, voice trembling. "You lived with me, slept next to me. We shared everything. Holidays, bills, my mother's funeral. Was all of that just data points to you?" Carmen blinked. Slowly. "Not at first. But yes." The room was silent for a long time after that. Just the hum of the air vent and the quiet cracking of something inside my chest that I would never be able to put back together. Finally, I asked, "Why me? What made me so perfect for this?" She opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out a thin manila folder. Inside were pages of text, charts, screenshots of my social media profiles, financial reports, a record of my therapy sessions, including ones I never told her about. "There's a pattern," she said, as if she were a professor and I were just another lecture hall. "People who avoid conflict. Men who are loyal to a fault. Men who grew up in homes where emotional reward was intermittent. Just enough love to keep chasing approval. They make ideal subjects. Highly susceptible to guilt, slow to question, eager to repair." I felt sick. "They knew I wouldn't leave," I whispered. "They bet on it," she said. And they were right. I looked at her for a long time. I don't know what I was hoping to see. Remorse, fear, some shred of the person I thought she was. But she was blank. A canvas that had been painted over too many times to recognize the original image. I walked out of the room. She didn't follow. I left the house for the second time, this time with no intention of ever coming back. But I wasn't done. I had names now. I had files. And I had questions no one wanted asked. I was no longer the subject. I was going to be the glitch in their system. 3 days passed after I walked out of that house again. 3 days without eating more than crackers and bad coffee, sleeping in 5-hour loops interrupted by flashes of her voice and the echo of that sentence. "You were selected." I kept thinking if I could just find someone else who went through what I did, I could make it make sense. Not emotionally. I had no delusions of closure, but logically. I needed to know what game I had been pulled into, who was behind it, and most of all, how many others had their lives torn apart the same way. So I went back to the only trace I had of Julian Caro that wasn't in Carmen's files, the companies listed on his resume. Most of them had dead links or redirected to under-construction placeholders. But one, Decorum Research Institute, was still active. Barely. A single-page website with a contact email and a generic mission statement about sociometric modeling and predictive behavioral analytics. I sent 3 messages over 2 days. No response. On the 3rd night, I received an email from a private encrypted address. No text. Just a location. Grain and Forge Cafe, 11:45 a.m. Table 9. Sit alone. Order nothing. Don't look around. There was no signature. No threat. Just an invitation or a test. I showed up 15 minutes early. The place was ordinary enough. Brick walls, Edison bulbs, indie folk music playing just loud enough to be annoying. Table 9 was tucked into the far back corner, partially hidden by a column. I sat down. I didn't order anything. I didn't look around. At exactly 11:46, a woman slid into the seat across from me. She was maybe in her mid-40s, hair tightly pulled back, eyes heavy with sleep or loss or both. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no expression. "You're Doug," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "They call me Clara," she added. "It's not my name." I stayed silent. She didn't seem the type to enjoy small talk. Clara reached into her coat and placed a flash drive on the table between us. I only have 10 minutes before they trace this, she said. So, I need you to listen. No interrupting. I nodded again. She leaned in. You're part of what they call Tier 3 dynamic pairing, one of the late-stage tests in a broader trial that's been running for over 8 years. It started as government-adjacent, split off after some blowback, went private. The name changes every 2 years. Right now, it's run by an entity called Erosite, operating through Shell NGOs and one foundation in Prague. What they're studying isn't just relationships. It's reaction loops, the collapse of trust. They're interested in what makes a person snap, mentally, socially, sometimes physically. I felt a weight pressing into my chest, like I was falling without moving. How many people? I asked, breaking her rule. Clara didn't blink. As of last month, 312 confirmed. You're one of the few who woke up before the exit phase. Exit phase. She hesitated. Looked around just once. They don't like loose ends. The words settled between us like dust. I felt every hair on my arms rise. Clara pushed the flash drive toward me. Everything I have is on here. Backups. Names. Locations. It's incomplete. I had to ditch my main rig last week. But you'll find references to other subjects. One of them, I believe, is your replacement. I stared at her. Replacement? Carmen has already been reassigned, she said flatly. She'll be reinserted into a new domestic framework. That's what they call it. You've been scrubbed. No. I saw her 3 nights ago. She was still in the house. Doug, Clara said, gently but firmly. That house was a containment site, not your home. They moved you there after selection. The walls have more microphones than insulation. They're probably burning it down as we speak. My skin felt electric, like I was vibrating inside my own bones. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I wanted to collapse. You think I'm crazy, she said, reading my face. No, I whispered. I think I finally understand what insanity feels like. Clara stood. You have 6, maybe 7 days before your financial accounts vanish. After that, they'll target your digital footprint. Once you're erased, you're nobody. I only got out because I knew someone in Red Team security. You won't be so lucky. Why are you helping me? I asked. She gave the smallest, saddest smile I've ever seen. Because I watched a man jump off a rooftop in Detroit when he found out his entire marriage was scripted. His name was Glenn. He thought he was going to be a father. She left without another word. I stayed at table 9 for 15 more minutes, staring at the flash drive. And that's when I realized I hadn't just been betrayed by Carmen. I'd been engineered. I didn't open the flash drive right away. I wish I could say I did, that I was brave and eager and ready to tear down the curtain. But the truth is, I stared at that little piece of metal for 2 full days. Moved it from one pocket to another. Left it on a motel nightstand. Slipped it into a sock. Took it out again. Like it might burn me if I opened it too soon. Like whatever was inside would finally push me over the edge from confused victim to irrevocably broken. But on the 3rd night, after waking from a dream where Carmen was speaking to me in reverse. No, not speaking, reciting something, like a script on loop. I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I plugged the drive into a burner laptop I bought that morning from a pawn shop and disabled its Wi-Fi. The files were organized by code names. No folder names, no readable structure. Just IDs and dates. It was Clara's voice on most of the audio recordings. I recognized her cadence, her clinical tone. She was one of them once, before she broke protocol. That much was clear. But then I found it, buried inside a folder marked MK, V22, Batch 03, Pre-Select, a video titled D_Pierce_Origin_Subject 115. MOV. I opened it. The screen showed surveillance footage, grainy, slightly distorted, timestamped, May 14, 2012. It took me a full 10 seconds to realize what I was looking at. It was me. Not recent me. 25-year-old me. Sitting alone on a park bench near Chesterfield Station, eating a sandwich and reading a book I couldn't quite make out. I was thinner then. A mess of hair. No beard. Less sadness behind the eyes. I watched the footage with a strange duality. Part of me reliving the moment, part of me floating above it like an outsider. At the 30-second mark, another person entered the frame. A man, early 40s, bald, navy trench coat. He sat beside me and handed me something. I couldn't tell what it was. A piece of paper, maybe, or a card. I looked at it. laughed, shook my head. He leaned in, paused, then placed a hand on my shoulder. The frame froze, then cut to black. The file ended. I stared at the screen for a long time, hands shaking. I had no memory of that day. None. And yet, there I was, perfectly captured in digital amber, speaking to a man I couldn't name, in a moment I should have remembered, but didn't. I played the video again, over and over, looking for clues. Then I noticed something. On the piece of paper, just before it folds, is a logo, barely visible, faded gold on white. I knew that logo. I'd seen it before, not in recent years, in college, back when I was broke and desperate and going through one of the worst years of my life. I'd signed up for a paid psychology study through the university's career board. I was promised $200 for a weekend retreat at a corporate training center 2 hours outside the city. They called it cognitive dynamics exposure therapy. I didn't ask questions. I needed the money. But I remember the paperwork. The logo on the bottom corner of the intake forms. The same one. They didn't find me through Carmen. They didn't discover me by accident. They'd tagged me over a decade ago. I was never off their radar. I was never free. That weekend study wasn't a one-off. It was a blueprint. Everything in my life, the friends I kept, the jobs I took, the places I moved, all of it may have been nudged. Subtly, consistently, controlled just enough to keep me on track. Like a rat in a maze too big to see the walls. My marriage wasn't the beginning of the experiment. It was the end phase. And the part that shook me the most? Carmen wasn't the first. There were other women, other trial partners, shorter durations, failed branches. As labeled in a file, I found 3 folders deeper. Some lasted weeks. One just 3 days. Most ended after non-compliant responses. Emotional volatility. Attempted exit. I wasn't just part of a single case study. I was their most successful long-term subject. And according to a heavily redacted progress report, I wasn't scheduled for release. I was scheduled for transition. The man in the park wouldn't leave my head. His face was burned into my mind like an afterimage from staring at the sun too long. Pale eyes, unnaturally calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from knowing something you're not supposed to know. Every time I tried to sleep, I saw that moment again. His hand on my shoulder, my younger self laughing, the flash of gold from that cursed logo. I had been looking for answers in my marriage, in Carmen's deceit, in the files and photos. But it hit me now, sitting in that half-lit motel room, that the real question wasn't why she did it. The question was why I was chosen. I began searching through the files Clara had given me again, line by line, until my eyes blurred. There were fragments of internal memos, each redacted so heavily that only a few phrases remained readable. Conditioning cycle, response integrity, identity, echo failure. Then one phrase stood out, highlighted in yellow, tagged with my case number. Previous engagement, Latham program. That was the first real lead I'd seen in days. It sounded bureaucratic, sterile, the kind of name you give something unspeakable so it fits on a budget report. I spent the next 2 hours digging through every trace of Latham program online. Almost nothing. A single reference buried in an old PDF from a Senate hearing about misused research funds from a decade ago. The document mentioned a small facility outside of Denver, supposedly defunct since 2013, used for adaptive behavioral trials on former intelligence consultants. My pulse spiked. I wasn't ex-military, never worked in government, never held a clearance. But the timing matched the video, 2012, the same year I was filmed in that park. Somehow, I had been connected to this thing years before it supposedly ended. I traced the contact address listed in the hearing record and found it linked to a dissolved LLC called Latham Cognitive Systems. The last registered manager was a man named Dr. Alan Hartwell. I ran the name through every search engine I could find. It came up once, in a scanned conference brochure from 2009, featuring a blurry headshot and a talk title, Self-Reinforcing Perception Models in Isolated Environments. Below his name was the affiliation, Decorum Research Institute. My stomach turned. That was Julian's old employer, the same company on his resume. This wasn't just one rogue scientist or a small covert group. It was a long chain of shells, layers of ownership designed to hide a single ongoing network. It had been quietly mutating for years, shifting names, dissolving, rebranding, then resurfacing under new banners. They had been studying people like me long before I ever met Carmen. People who fit a certain mold, passive, malleable, lost in their own routines. People who wouldn't notice their lives being edited until it was too late. Around 3 in the morning, I called the number listed in the PDF's footnotes. It went straight to voicemail, an automated tone, followed by silence. Then, a click. A man's voice came on. Old, tired, but steady. "Douglas," he said. My blood froze. "You're late. You weren't supposed to see that video." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat felt like sandpaper. "I warned Clara," the voice continued, "that you weren't ready for this stage. You were meant to transition quietly. But since we're here, let's make this simple. Stop digging. Leave the city. The next phase has already begun." And then the line went dead. I just sat there, holding the phone, staring at nothing. My first instinct was that it was some kind of trick, a scare tactic to keep me from uncovering more. But something about his tone didn't feel like a threat. It sounded disappointed, like a teacher scolding a student who peeked at the answers before the test was over. I replayed his words in my head over and over. The next phase has already begun. I looked around the motel room. Every detail suddenly suspicious. The blinking smoke detector light, the static hum of the mini fridge, the faint ticking in the wall. I yanked open the smoke detector and found a small black dot inside. A pinhole camera. I smashed it against the floor, heart pounding, then tore the room apart. Under the bed, behind the mirror, inside the vent. 3 more devices. All identical. They knew exactly where I was. I packed my things in 10 minutes, left cash on the nightstand, and drove east until sunrise. No music, no destination, just the highway and my thoughts tearing themselves apart. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting headlights that never came. At one point, I caught my own reflection and barely recognized the man staring back. Hollow eyes, beard grown wild, a thin streak of gray I didn't have before. I wasn't running from Carmen anymore. I was running from an entire system that had built my life like a stage play, cast me in the lead role, and decided the ending before I even learned my lines. When the sun finally rose over the horizon, I found myself outside a small diner in rural Kansas. I parked, walked inside, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window. There were maybe 5 other people there, a trucker, 2 old women, a couple whispering to each other. For the first time in weeks, I felt almost invisible. Safe, maybe. Until I looked up at the television mounted above the counter. The morning news was playing a segment about a recent fire in Colorado. A facility outside Denver burned to the ground. No survivors. The cheer read, "Abandoned research center destroyed in suspected arson." They showed a photo of the building, charred, skeletal. It was labeled, Latham Cognitive Systems. And standing among the ruins in a still image captured from a drone feed was a man in a navy trench coat. The same man from the park. Still alive. Still watching. And somehow, impossibly, he looked younger. I stayed in that diner for hours, nursing bitter coffee and watching the same looped footage of the fire over and over, waiting for the crawl at the bottom of the screen to reveal something they hadn't scrubbed. A name, a detail, anything that felt human. But the media knew nothing. The local police had sealed the site. Federal agencies were reviewing potential foul play. It was all noise. The kind designed to keep the public uninterested, to let it slip quietly from memory by Thursday. But I couldn't forget. The man in the navy coat, his face frozen on that screen, haunted me more than Carmen ever did. It wasn't just his expression. It was what it meant. He was still out there, and somehow, time didn't touch him the same way it touched the rest of us. Either that, or they had started running newer versions of the same experiment with tighter control, faster iteration. And maybe that didn't matter anymore. Because I had one thing they didn't plan for. I was awake. Fully, utterly, unshakably awake. They say that waking up doesn't come all at once. It's true. For me, it came in layers. First, the realization that my marriage was a lie. Then the acceptance that my memories were curated. Then the understanding that I had been watched, studied, shaped since before I even knew how to guard myself. But now, sitting in that nowhere town, I realized something more powerful than any of that. They had failed. Because their entire system only worked if I never questioned it. If I kept playing my role. If I fell apart when they pulled the final thread. But I didn't fall apart. I adapted. I began planning. I used Clara's files. Dug deeper. Connected threads. Changed my identity. Deleted my digital presence. One by one, I mapped the remaining contacts tied to the Latham program and Erosite's shell fronts. Not to attack them, not to expose them. That would be suicidal. No, I built a warning system. A quiet one. I created a network of watchers, people who had been scrubbed, like me. The ones who slipped through the cracks. The ones who woke up just enough to ask questions, to feel the edges of something they weren't supposed to notice. We reached out in signals, not messages, but breadcrumbs. Library book checkouts in a specific sequence. Emails with certain misspellings. Craigslist posts with intentionally wrong zip codes. Old school, analog surveillance. I wasn't running anymore. I was listening. And then, one day, I got a signal. A small envelope, no return address, slipped into the P.O. box I'd set up under my new name. Inside, a Polaroid. A familiar layout. Handwritten date in the corner. But this time, it wasn't of me. It was of a woman. Late 30s. Sitting alone at a train station bench. She was smiling, but her eyes were empty. I flipped the photo over. Just 2 words written in block letters. Tier 3 candidate. They were still recruiting. But now? So was I? I found her. Took my time. Approached her carefully, the way Clara once approached me. She didn't remember the retreat either. But after I told her what little I could, she stared at me like I'd handed her a mirror she hadn't known she needed. And that's how it began. The network grew. Slowly. Quietly. We didn't expose Erosite. We didn't make noise. We did something better. We disrupted. We intervened. We traced new subjects and pulled them out before the shift. Before they were broken. Before their trust was dissolved. And in that work, I found something no one thought I'd ever be capable of again. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind you earn when you refuse to be controlled. I started eating better. Sleeping again. I grew a beard that actually looked decent. I adopted a dog from a shelter, named him Signal. I read fiction, wrote in notebooks, stayed in places no one could find me unless I wanted to be found. And Carmen? I never saw her again. Sometimes I wonder where they placed her next. What script she's reading now. But that curiosity fades faster than I expected. Because I know one day, someone will reach her. A Clara. A Doug. Someone who woke up. She won't win every time. They won't. Not anymore. I'm not the subject anymore. I'm the error in their code. And I'm never going back to sleep.